Hello, welcome to the second episode, I guess we call it that, of my new YouTube channel here, the Great Takes Great Lakes YouTube channel. Maybe just people like Stackpool, we'll figure something out. And after last night's announcement right before the Monday Night Football game, where the GOAT won another game, didn't play very well, but had a pretty legendary last drive after a monumental choke from the Saints, but I digress. They announced the Heisman nominees, and this is a good time every year. We kind of thought we had an idea of who it was going to be, and it was pretty shocking. Caleb Williams, quarterback from USC, makes sense, probably going to win the thing, even though he painted some bad things on his fingernails, which is questionable at best. C.J. Stroud, the quarterback for Ohio State, he's been very good, should have won it last year in my opinion, over Bryce Young, and this is coming from a Michigan fan. In addition to him, they had Max Duggan, TCU, a bit more surprising, but with the injuries to other leading candidates, kind of made more sense. And then Stetson Bennett, quarterback, Georgia, kind of came out of nowhere. He's objectively not a very good quarterback. Very good, elite. We're talking about elite here. It's the Heisman. Obviously, he's a good quarterback, but you know what I mean? Like, he's not like top five of his position, I would say. And that's pretty shocking for a Heisman candidate. But people made that argument a lot with Aiden Hutchinson last year versus Will Anderson. But it was top two, top three at the best. And then Kenneth Walker was a snub last year. Now you could probably say the same thing about guys like Blake Corum and Bijan Robinson, running backs from Michigan and Texas, respectively. Running back's always a hard one to talk about because they're so replaceable in the NFL, which I know it's not really an award about the NFL, but, there's a guy like Israel Adebakandia from Pitt. Guy puts up obscene numbers. I mean, I have the stats up here behind the camera, and he had, in his season, he had 239 rushes for 1,431 yards, along with 80 averaged 6 yards a carry and had 20 touchdowns. That's ridiculous, right? Dwayne McBride led UAB, but then again, it's like Chase Bryce had a lot more attempts. Chase Brown, from Illinois. I watched him in person. It was kind of underwhelming against a good defense like Michigan, but then he broke off a few and obviously kept it pretty close. Then you look at Michigan's Blake Corum, right? He missed 2 games in the year. He had 1,463 yards, so more than Adekanya, and he had 18 touchdowns. His argument, and this is going to be interesting, what makes him not good in people's eyes, air quotes, obviously good being elite, like top 3 or 4 in the country, is his offensive line was so good. Obviously, it's a good problem to have for me as a Michigan fan. However, it's you just got to look at it and take it as you can, because Donovan Edwards is just as good and had very good numbers when he left. So everyone's like, oh, well, it's not Corum, it's the offensive line, it's the system. If you watch the Illinois game, Donovan Edwards is out as well. C.J. Stokes and Isaiah Gash, a walk-on and a lesser recruit, who I both think are going to be very good going forward. They couldn't really run the ball at all, and that's kind of why Illinois hung around and got back into the game. But Bijan Robinson, another one, unbelievable season, 18 touchdowns, 1,580 yards. I mean, he was all over the place for Texas. He was their best player. Quinn Ewers got all the hype, but Bijan carried him. It's very easy to help a young freshman quarterback out with an elite running back. Bijan will be a top pick in the draft, probably top 15, I would imagine. He's probably going to be the first running back, if not guaranteed, off the board. Looking at other positions, receiver hasn't really been a thing in a long time, but when you look at the receiver, this is going to sound crazy. Why isn't Charlie Jones getting any talk? He's the white receiver from Purdue. He was a transfer from Iowa, and if you watched the Michigan game, Michigan-Purdue Big Ten Championship game, he was the second coming of Cooper Kupp. And I've always heard his name mentioned, when people are like, oh, you don't know ball, you don't know Charlie Jones. He had 110 receptions, 1,361 yards, and 12 touchdowns this year. He led the country in receptions and yards. That's pretty crazy. The receiver you hear a lot about, Marvin Harrison Jr. from Ohio State. He had a pretty good year, but there was a few games he's disappeared. And then there's another guy out there who's people think he's a a system receiver, but I just think he's unbelievable. I mean, he's built like Devonta Smith, where it's like his arms go down to his knees. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's just crazy. He's got huge arms, like length arms, and he's just fast. Jalen Hyatt, Tennessee, 67 receptions, 1,267 yards, and 15 touchdowns. I mean, it seemed like he had a touchdown for like 80 yards every game. And, it's just what happened. He had a 78-yard touchdown. Forgot what game it was, but it was unbelievable. Should he be nominated? Probably not, right? But he should get talked about for sure. I mean, I think it'd be interesting if there was maybe not more people talked about the Heisman, but they release like a top 10. I think they do, but be interesting to see how that would be this year. And then we get to the quarterbacks, and this is where it gets interesting, right? So we have Caleb Williams, the fourth most passing yards. And then, Stetson Bennett, 11th, Max Duggan, 16th, C.J. Stroud, 15th. C.J. Stroud has a lot of good receivers, really good system, so you can keep that in mind. Him and pretty much Stetson kind of fall in that category. Caleb Williams as well. Like a Drake May. He's got one good receiver, but he's the quarterback for UNC, Drake May. He had 4,115 yards, and he had 35 touchdowns, 7 picks. And when he was bad, they lost. When he was good, they obviously won. They pulled off some crazy wins and were competitive against a lot of really good teams. But there was a few games he just didn't play well, and they lost. So that might help his case, as weird as that sounds. But then again, same can be made against Caleb Williams. He had a bad second half against Utah. He got hurt. I don't know when he got hurt, but the first few minutes of that game was unbelievable. In the USC UCLA game that Michigan fans were watching, hoping USC lost to help Michigan out if we were to lose Ohio State. Thankfully, it didn't happen. So you get both Big Ten teams in, which did happen because of USC losing eventually. He was very good in the first half, and then the second half he just couldn't run, and the team collapsed around him. Granted, the defense was horrific, but he had unbelievable numbers with 37 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. Now, there's 2 guys left I haven't mentioned yet. Hendon Hooker, Tennessee. So this is a bit more into the story aspect that Tennessee was horrible and they brought it all the way back, right? He's the best team Tennessee's had in a long time. He had 3,135 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 2 picks, which is an unbelievable record. They handed the ball off a ton on the 1-yard line. He had a bunch of rushing yards and touchdowns himself. Nothing to the likes of Denard Robinson or other big running quarterbacks, but he was able to, he was a dual threat guy. Most of these guys aren't. Caleb Williams started to once Travis Dye, his running back, got hurt. But yeah, Hendon Hooker probably should be there, right? The number 1 snub, and as crazy as this sounds, this is kind of how you know something's going wild. Michael Penix Jr. So those of you that don't watch Pac-12 football, he's the quarterback for Washington. He had an unbelievable season. He had 4,354 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. Not as many touchdowns and a little more interceptions than a lot of other guys, but he had the most yards in the country. He was the quarterback for Indiana the previous 4 seasons. And he got benched in Indiana, who is a dreadful program outside of a Tim Allen crazy year in COVID where Michael Penix lost them the game against Ohio State where it was in the 50s, right? You pull up Michael Penix's career stats. He had more yards this season than his previous 4 seasons. That's crazy, right? He had 200 yards freshman year, whatever. He started his second, the 2019 and 2020 seasons. He had 1,300 yards, 1,600 yards. And in 2021, he kind of got pulled at the end. I believe he got hurt, but it was kind of like he got pulled. He also recently announced that he was pulled back. He will be coming back this year and foregoing the NFL draft. I don't know if he'd get picked. He'd be an interesting 3rd, 4th round guy that would come out of nowhere and be like a backup. It's like, oh, hey, remember him? He had a really good season. Now that he's coming back to Washington, right, USC is going to be good, obviously. Utah loses a lot. Oregon loses a lot, and a lot of portal going on. Deion to Colorado, which would be a video very soon, is coming up. But you really look at it, Michael Penix might win the damn thing next year. As to who's going to win it this year, I would think it's still going to be Caleb Williams. There's a lot of early voting, mail-in voting done by the older people of the Heisman votes, but I think I could see him winning. C.J. Stroud is pretty good. Don't think so. Stetson Bennett might win it for the story, but Max Duggan too was the same one where he had the most, I guess, would say Heisman moment during that Big 12 championship game, which I cannot believe they lost. But we'll get more into him in the playoff along with C.J. Stroud in future videos. But I'm looking at my camera here; it's about 10 minutes. I wanted to be quicker than that, but we blinked and it's 10 minutes. So that's the quick thoughts about the Heisman. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Please like and subscribe, and thank you for supporting me as always. Thank you.